Yo, new lady, let's see how long you last. Rico Daniels' voice cut through the chaos like a thrown bottle in a bar fight. The whole class burst out laughing. The room smelled like leftover lunch and cheap cologne. Chairs scraped. Paper flew. A phone played a TikTok video on full volume somewhere near the back. Naomi Reed stepped into room 1B of Lincoln Memorial High without blinking. She didn't flinch, didn't frown. She just took 2 steps in, closed the door softly behind her, and walked toward the front of the class. Her boots made a muted rhythm against the old tile floor. She wore a simple navy blazer, gray slacks, and thick-rimmed glasses that caught the fluorescent light and threw it back like mirrors. A few kids whispered. One girl, Tanya, judging by the sparkle of her purple braid, tilted her phone just enough to record. Naomi set her bay down. It was army green, canvas worn, stitched on the side with a faded name tag, Reed. She faced the board, picked up a marker, and wrote 3 words in clean, sharp letters. Miss Reed, English. The laughter didn't stop. In fact, it got louder. One kid imitated a teacher voice. Another hummed the funeral march. Rico leaned back in his chair, one boot tapping the underside of his desk, smirking like a man who had already won. Naomi turned slowly. Her gaze swept the room, deliberate, steady, not hostile, not warm, just present. First, she said, her voice low but carrying, I don't answer to new lady. Second, let's all find out together how long I last. Some students chuckled. A few exchanged looks. Tanya rolled her eyes. Devin, who sat to Rico's right, leaned over and whispered, She's already breaking. Naomi smiled faintly, then opened the battered manila folder in her hand. Today we start with a short story. It's called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelis. Ever heard of it? Dead silence. Naomi looked straight at Rico. Didn't think so. For the next 3 minutes, she tried to speak over side conversations, fake yawns, pencil drumming, and one deliberately timed cough attack. She didn't snap. She didn't raise her voice. But her eyes kept moving, sharp and unblinking. At the 4-minute mark, a folded note landed at her feet. It was pink, glittery, and sealed with a heart sticker. Naomi bent down, picked it up, and peeled it open with the same calm motion she might use to unwrap a sandwich. Inside, scrawled in shaky cursive, You're cute. Too bad your class sucks. Signed, Your secret admirer. Giggles exploded in waves. Someone fake whistled. Naomi read the note, looked up, and said dryly, Appreciate the honesty, but if you're going to write anonymous love notes, at least spell your correctly. The class howled. Rico's smile faltered just a bit. If you feel angry that a classroom has become a place to humiliate the very person trying to teach, drop a 0 in the comments. Let's not stay silent in the face of cruelty. Naomi walked to the trash can and dropped the note in. Then she turned, leaned slightly on the edge of her desk, and let the quiet settle. I've stood in front of people who didn't want me there. I've had boots thrown at me, food dumped on my cot, and worse. So unless this room has snipers I don't know about, it's going to take more than notes and noise to scare me off. That silenced the back row. Devin muttered under his breath. What the hell? Naomi raised one brow. Something you'd like to share? Nah, ma'am, he said too quickly. Rico crossed his arms and stared at her like he was calculating something. He didn't speak again for the rest of the period. The bell rang 15 minutes later. Kids grabbed their stuff in a shuffle of backpacks and attitudes. Naomi didn't say dismissed. She just watched them leave one by one. Tanya lingered, just for a beat, and Naomi caught her eye. That was a cute note, Naomi said, without looking up from her folder. Tanya froze. Wasn't mine. I didn't say it was. When the room was empty, Naomi walked to the window. Outside, a student was skateboarding past the no skateboarding sign. A teacher next door slammed a door. Life went on. But room 1B had changed. Not by much. Just a shift, like the temperature dropping before a storm. Naomi Reed adjusted her glasses, sat at her desk, and started planning tomorrow's lesson. The war hadn't started, but the battlefield had been drawn. Naomi Reed arrived at Lincoln Memorial High 15 minutes early the next morning, parking her second-hand Honda in a nearly empty lot. The engine coughed once before shutting off. She sat for a moment, staring at the building. There was a small rip in the shoulder of her blazer, stitched back neatly the night before. Her hand brushed over it, a quiet ritual. Then she exhaled, stepped out, and walked into the lion's den. Room 1B was quiet when she entered. That didn't last. Students shuffled in with the same swagger and smirks as yesterday. Rico entered last, surrounded by Devin, Tanya, and Miguel. His confidence had returned overnight. He looked Naomi over with slow amusement and said, "Still here? Must be desperate." Naomi didn't flinch. She was arranging the books on her desk. "Still leading this class with juvenile stunts? Must be scared." The laughter was quieter this time. Tanya coughed to cover a snort. Devin raised his phone again. Ready. Miguel, as usual, said nothing, his eyes watchful. Naomi wrote 2 words on the board. Character arc. Some students blinked. Rico scoffed. "You're in the wrong room, Miss Marvel. We don't degrowth here. Everyone does. Some of you just start lower on the chart," Naomi said calmly. She turned around. "Let's try something new." She opened a small cardboard box beside her desk and pulled out sealed envelopes, each one labeled with a student's name. Inside are characters, not superheroes, sorry, fictional, broken, conflicted, like real people. You're going to read their files and decide what changes them. She paused. If anything, murmurs, suspicion. A few opened theirs. Devin groaned. "Mine's some loser named Holden Caulfield." Naomi smiled. "If you hate him by the end of today, I've done my job." Just as she began to pace, a sharp snap echoed from the back of the room. Naomi turned slowly. A water bottle lay at her feet. Its cap was loose, and the contents foul-smelling liquid had sprayed across her shoes. The room froze. Devin's camera was rolling. Naomi didn't react. She bent, picked up the bottle, sniffed it, then set it on Rico's desk. "You forgot to tighten the seal," she said, brushing the drops from her slacks with a paper towel. "Beginner mistake." Rico's jaw clenched. Tanya looked away. Devin swallowed a laugh. Naomi walked back to the front, her movements precise. "So, character arc. Let's talk about fear. Not the scream and run kind. The other kind. The kind that makes you push people before they get too close." That landed. For a few seconds, even Rico's posture faltered. "You know what's interesting?" Naomi continued. "The bullies in literature, they almost never win, because authors know something most people forget. Cruelty is boring. It's predictable. You want to be unforgettable? Show change." She let that sit, then handed Tanya a copy of The Lottery. "Read this paragraph out loud." Tanya narrowed her eyes but complied. Her voice was steady, but her usual edge was dulled. She read about the townspeople, the ritual, the quiet complicity in cruelty. When she finished, Naomi asked, "What would make someone stay silent when they know something is wrong?" Tanya shrugged. "Because they don't want to be next." Naomi nodded. "Exactly. Fear, again." By the time the bell rang, only 3 students had pretended not to listen. Everyone else, including Rico, was still. Not engaged, not obedient, but still. As the class filed out, Devin muttered to Rico, "She's like a quiet nuke." "She won't last," Rico replied, but his tone lacked certainty. Naomi stayed behind, wiping her shoes. As she reached for her folder, she noticed something odd, a folded note tucked under her eraser. No glitter, no insults. Just 5 words, written in a sharp, neat hand. "Don't let them win again." No name, no clue. She held it for a beat, then slipped it into her bag. Down the hall, the intercom crackled to life with announcements, but Naomi wasn't listening. Her thoughts drifted not to her class, not to Rico, not even to the stunts, but to a desert camp 3 years earlier, when a soldier under her command had once said, "Sometimes, the best revenge is outliving the threat." Room 1B hadn't changed yet, but it had blinked, and Naomi knew. Blinking was the first step to seeing. Friday morning broke gray and heavy over Detroit, the kind of sky that pressed low against the buildings and made the city feel smaller. Naomi Reed sat in the staff lounge, stirring her coffee with quiet, precise movements. The bitter scent reminded her of early mornings on base when silence was thick and decisions carried weight. Across the table, a young math teacher was venting about missing calculators. Naomi only half listened. Her thoughts were fixed on the note from the day before. "Don't let them win again." She had read it a dozen times. Every time, it stirred something in her chest, not fear, not flattery, but memory. Someone in room 1B had crossed a line, and someone else had reached back across it. She stepped into the hallway just before the first bell. As she walked toward room 1B, she passed a group of seniors clustered near a vending machine. One of them glanced at her and smirked. "Here comes the boot camp lady." Naomi ignored it. Inside 1B, the air was different, less mocking, more watchful. Tanya sat with her legs crossed, scrolling her phone but not giggling. Devin had his camera, but it stayed on the desk. Miguel nodded at Hera, barely perceptible acknowledgement. Only Rico maintained his posture of royalty, chair tilted back, arms crossed, half-lidded eyes scanning the ceiling. Naomi wrote a single phrase on the board: shame versus remorse. No explanation, just the words. "You ever feel bad for something?" she asked. "Not because someone caught you, but because something inside you just couldn't let it go?" Tonya raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that the same thing?" "No," Naomi said, turning around. "Shame is what others hand you. Remorse is what you carry on your own." She let the words settle. Devin muttered, "Deep. Let's see how deep we can go." Naomi handed out thin manila envelopes again. Today's set wasn't characters, they were real stories. Articles about teenage hazing, public apologies, viral videos of cruelty caught on tape. "You'll pair up," Naomi said. "Choose one story. Then you'll write a reflection not as yourselves, but as the one who did the harm. Try to explain why you did it, what you were thinking, what you feel now." There was a collective groan. "That's not English," Rico said. "That's therapy." "Sometimes," Naomi replied. "They're the same thing." Reluctantly, the students got to work. Naomi moved through the room, answering questions, ignoring stares. She passed Rico's group. They hadn't opened their envelope. "Problem?" she asked. Rico gave her a lazy grin. "We're waiting for the movie version." Naomi leaned on the edge of his desk. "All right, let's do a live one." That got a few looks. She pulled a chair and sat, eye level with Rico. The room grew still. "Yesterday," she said, "someone left a note on my desk. No insults. Just 5 words. Don't let them win again." Devin stopped chewing his pen. Naomi continued. "Now, maybe it was a joke. Or maybe it was real. Doesn't matter. Because those words, they reminded me of someone. A boy I knew back in a place a lot hotter than this school." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look around. Just locked eyes with Rico. He was mean. Not because he enjoyed it, but because he was afraid someone would be meaner first. It was easier to punch than to ask. He thought it made him strong. Rico's jaw clenched, just slightly. Naomi leaned closer. "But here's the thing. Fear disguised as power? It always shows its cracks. One day, that boy dropped his act, just for a second, and it saved his life." The room was silent. Rico's voice came quiet. "What happened to him?" "He's alive, somewhere, trying to do better." Rico scoffed, but it was hollow. Naomi stood and walked back to the front. "If any of you want to rewrite that reflection as that boy, go ahead. I'll recognize the voice." The bell rang. Students shuffled out slower today. Tanya lingered again, this time with a brief nod. Devin looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. Rico walked out last. As he passed Naomi, he dropped a folded sheet of notebook paper on her desk. No glitter, no jokes. She waited until he was gone before opening it. It said only, "I'm not him. Yet." She folded the note and slipped it next to the first. Later that afternoon, in the teacher's lounge, someone asked her how room 1B was going. Naomi just smiled and said, "They're loud, but they're listening." Outside, the clouds began to break. The light didn't pour in. It crept slow and cautious, like something testing the ground. She had seen that before, and she knew what came next. The first thing Naomi noticed when she walked into room 1B that morning wasn't the noise, it was the silence. A strange, heavy quiet settled over the room, the kind that didn't come from respect but from anticipation. Rico was already in his seat. Devin sat beside him, phone on the desk, fingers tapping. Tanya leaned back with her arms crossed, chewing gum like it was armor. Miguel sat closest to the door, eyes unreadable. Naomi's steps were steady, but she felt the tension in the air, the unspoken signal that something had shifted. She set her bag down and wrote a phrase on the board. Power doesn't always shout. Then she turned to face the room. You ever wonder why the loudest people in the room are usually the ones most afraid? That got a few blinks. Devin chuckled under his breath, but it wasn't the usual smug laugh. Tanya looked out the window. Rico said nothing. Naomi continued, We're going to read a story today. Not fiction. Real. I want you to hear it. She pulled a slim folder from her bag and began to read aloud, not from a textbook, but from a declassified transcript, dated 15 years ago. It was a report about a young soldier in Kandahar who had defied orders to protect civilians during an airstrike. He'd been court-martialed, stripped of rank, but later vindicated when his actions saved 23 lives. The story ended with one line from the soldier. I didn't speak because I wasn't scared. I spoke because I was done being silent. Naomi looked up. The question is, which one are you right now? The scared voice or the silent one waiting to be heard? Before anyone could answer, a soft buzz cut through the room. Devin's phone lit up. He grabbed it instinctively, but Naomi had already stepped forward and gently picked it up from his desk. The screen was still on. A TikTok video. It showed Naomi, in the classroom, speaking about fear, but the edit was cruel cut to make it look like she was mocking her students. The caption read, Boot Camp Barbie schooling the hood eye. The room broke into murmurs. Naomi stared at the video, her jaw tight. She handed the phone back to Devin without a word, then returned to the front. Her voice was low, calm, but sharp. Someone here wants to turn truth into a punchline, wants the world to laugh instead of listen. Fine, but understand this, when you post something, you're not just sending it into the air. You're saying, this is who I am, and people will believe you. The murmurs faded. Rico shifted in his seat. Open your notebooks, Naomi said. New prompt. I want you to write from the perspective of the person in that video, the version of me they want the world to see. Then I want you to write the version you see sitting in front of you. Devin frowned. Why? Because contrast reveals truth, she replied, and most of you don't know the difference until you see both sides. The class went quiet, pencils scratching. 10 minutes passed, then 20. A few students looked at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time. When the bell rang, Tanya stood up but didn't leave right away. She walked over and handed Naomi her paper. I only wrote the second part, she said. The real you. Naomi accepted it with a quiet nod. Thank you. Devin hovered near the door. I didn't post it, he muttered. I know, Naomi said. But you laughed. He swallowed, then nodded and left. Only Rico remained. He stared at the board, then stood, hands in his pockets. You know, he said slowly, the last teacher we had, Mr. Langley, he yelled a lot. But at least we knew what he was about. You're different. You don't get loud. You just. Look. Naomi met his gaze. And that scares you? He shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I just don't like feeling seen. Naomi said nothing. She let the silence speak. Rico took a step toward the door, then paused. The video's gonna stay up, you know. You can't control that. No, Naomi said. But I can control what I teach in this room. And if that includes how to respond to cruelty without becoming cruel, then it's worth it. Rico studied her for a long moment. Then he left. Naomi sat at her desk, holding Tanya's paper in one hand, Devin's buzzing phone still fresh in her mind. She knew there would be more tests, more eyes watching. But today, something had cracked, not shattered. Not yet, but cracked enough to let the light in. And she would be ready. By Wednesday morning, the video had spread far beyond the school. Naomi heard whispers in the hallways, caught sideways glances in the parking lot, and saw the way other teachers avoided eye contact in the lounge. In room 1B, though, the tension was thick, brittle, like a pane of glass ready to shatter. She entered class without a word, no greeting, no instructions. She simply walked to the board and wrote, Control versus influence. The students stared at her, waiting. Tanya twirled her pen. Devin looked down at his phone, though he didn't touch it. Miguel kept tapping his foot against the desk leg. Rico, arms folded across his chest, leaned back in his seat like a judge waiting to hear a confession. Naomi turned around slowly. I know some of you think what happened this week made you powerful. Rico smirked. Well, it kind of did. No, she replied. It made you loud. There's a difference. She took a step closer to the front row, her voice still steady. Let me show you what real power looks like. She opened her bag and pulled out a worn, folded sheet of military-grade paper creased, slightly stained. She held it up. This is the last letter I wrote while overseas. I didn't know if I'd come home. I wrote it to myself. Not to be read if I died, but to remind me why I wanted to live. The class didn't move. Naomi unfolded it slowly, then read, "If fear gets louder than what I believe in, I lose more than my life. I lose myself. Speak steady, stand calm, and finish the mission." She folded the paper and looked up. This classroom is my mission now, and no amount of edits or comments or hashtags is going to make me abandon it. For the first time, no one said a word, not even Rico. Then, without warning, the door swung open. Principal Hartley stepped in, lips pressed thin, face unreadable. "Miss Reed, may I have a word?" Naomi nodded, motioned to the class. "Read chapter 6 while I'm out." In the hallway, Hartley wasted no time. "We've received 3 parent complaints. One student claims you've been militarizing the classroom. Another says you're emotionally manipulating kids. And," he held up his phone showing a screenshot, "this came from a local blog. They're running a story titled, 'Ex-Soldier Turned Teacher Uses Trauma Tactics on Inner-City Youth.'" Naomi's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. "I haven't raised my voice once," she said. Hartley looked at her. "I know, but this school runs on perception more than truth. I need you to ease off. Stick to the curriculum. No more journals, no more speeches. So, teach the test and keep quiet. I'm asking you to protect your job, and maybe mine while you're at it." Back in the classroom, the atmosphere had changed. The students were restless. Naomi felt it before she even reached the desk. Rico stood at the front, holding her journal. She froze. He turned to her. "You left this open. Herr Stomachsank. Put it down." But Rico didn't. He flipped to a page, glanced at it, then read aloud. "He reminds me of a boy I knew once. All muscle, all noise, but terrified of being forgotten." Gasps rippled through the room. Tanya slapped her desk. "Damn." Naomi crossed the room slowly, her voice like ice. "Rico, give it back." He did. Not roughly, not defiantly, just carefully. Then he looked her in the eyes and said, "That about me?" Naomi didn't answer right away. The room was holding its breath. She glanced around, then said clearly, "If it was, it came from a place of understanding, not attack." Rico hesitated. Something in him flickered like a boy at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or turn back. Then Devon's phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't check it. Instead, he stood and said, "Yo, that video? It's not even funny anymore. My cousin saw it and thought it was real. Thought Miss Reed was clowning us." Naomi blinked. Devon continued, louder now, more certain. "It's fake. And we let it ride." Tonya muttered. "We didn't post it, but we watched it." Devon shot back, and we laughed. Silence. Naomi stepped forward. "The question isn't who started it. It's who's going to stop it." Rico's voice came quieter. "I could take it down." Naomi looked at him. "That's not enough." He frowned. "What do you want me to do? Get on camera and cry?" "No," she said gently. "But maybe, just maybe, you write your own version. Tell the truth, and tell it loud." Rico stared at her. Then, with a slow exhale, he sat down. For the rest of the period, they didn't read chapter 6. They wrote. Not all of them, not well, but they wrote. When the bell rang, Naomi stayed seated at her desk. As the students filed out, Tanya paused and said, "That thing about fear and power? That hit." Devon just said, "Respect." Rico didn't say anything, but as he passed her desk, he dropped a folded piece of notebook paper on it. Naomi waited until the room was empty before opening it. 4 words, written in rough, slanted handwriting. 1 step, your move. Naomi smiled, faint but true. The line had been drawn, but for the first time, they weren't standing on opposite sides of it anymore. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of wet cement. Naomi Reed pulled into the school parking lot, gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. The storm was no longer outside, it had entered room 1B, but it hadn't broken her. Not yet. Not even close. She walked into the classroom to find a surprise waiting. On the board, in neat, careful handwriting, someone had written, "Control is loud, influence is quiet. Thanks for choosing the second." No signature, just the words. Naomi stood in front of them for a long second, then slowly erased them. Not out of rejection, but because today, the message had to come from her. The students filed in one by one. They were different now, not saints. Not model pupils, but less defensive, less performative. Devin nodded. Tanya offered a thin-lipped smile. Even Miguel gave a small wave. Rico came in last. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The note he left the day before, "One step, your move," was still in her bag, and she had thought long and hard about how to respond. Naomi set a single piece of paper on each desk. "You'll find a prompt. It's optional, but I hope you'll try." On each page, the prompt read, "Write the apology you never gave, or the one you still owe." The room stilled. Tanya raised an eyebrow. "You want us to say sorry?" "I want you to practice empathy," Naomi replied. "Even if you never send the letter," Devin muttered. "What if we don't owe nobody nothing?" Naomi looked at him. "Then write to yourself." Pence didn't move at first. But then, like a reluctant wave, the room shifted. Heads lowered. Hands began to write. Naomi sat at her desk, watching. She didn't read over their shoulders. She didn't interrupt. She let the silence work. 10 minutes in, Rico stood up and walked to the front. Naomi's muscle tensed. He turned around to face the class, held up his letter. Then, without waiting for permission, he began to read. "To Miss Reed," he said. "I don't do sorry real well, so I'm going to do this my way. I didn't post that video, but I laughed. I let it spread. I let people think it was true. I figured, better you than me. But then you didn't yell. You didn't send us out. You didn't even flinch, and it messed with me." Devin exhaled. Tanya blinked fast. "I've seen teachers lose it just because I looked at them wrong. You? You kept showing up, even when we gave you every reason not to. So, this is me saying, I see you, and I think you see me too. Even the stuff I don't say." He folded the letter, walked over, and placed it on Naomi's desk. "You can keep that, or throw it away. I don't care." She met his eyes. "Thank you." Then Devin stood up. "Yo, if he's doing it, I guess I can too." His apology wasn't read aloud, but he handed her a crumpled page that said, "Sorry I laughed. You deserved better." Naomi took it without a word, placed it in the same folder as Rico's. By the end of the class, 7 letters sat in that folder. Some folded, some sealed, one written in pencil with half the words crossed out. None of them perfect, all of them real. When the bell rang, the students didn't rush out. They moved slowly, like they were leaving a space they finally started to feel safe in. Rico lingered. "So now what? We all start acting like good kids?" Naomi smiled faintly. Now we start acting like people who know better." He didn't argue. As she packed up her things, a soft knock came at the door. It was Principal Hartley. "Got a minute?" he asked. Naomi nodded and followed him into the hallway. "I heard about today," he said. "About the letters." "I didn't make them share," she said. "It was voluntary." "I know, but 3 parents emailed me this morning. Not to complain, to thank us. Said their kids came home last night, talking." Naomi's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "I'm not saying the fire's out," Hartley added, "but you're changing the air in that room. Just don't burn yourself out doing it." Naomi nodded. Not planning on going anywhere. Back inside room 1B, the desks were empty. The silence was soft, not sharp like before. It was the kind that came after something sacred had been said. Naomi sat at her desk, opened Rico's letter again, and reread the last line, "I think you see me too." She closed the folder, exhaled, smiled. Change never came with trumpets. Sometimes, it walked in wearing sneakers and a hoodie, left a note, and said, "Your move." And she had answered. Friday morning arrived, draped in gold. The sun had returned, casting long shadows across the school's front lawn. Naomi Reed walked through the main doors of Lincoln Memorial High with something new in her chestnut pride. Not relief, but a quiet steadiness. Something had changed, not just in room 1B, but inside her. As she stepped into her classroom, she paused. On the whiteboard, someone had scrawled in permanent marker, "Reed is fake. Boot camp witch. The words were thick, black, angry. A drawing underneath mocked her glasses, her calm expression, her name twisted into something ugly. Naomi stood still. For a long, long second, she did nothing. Then she placed her bag down and reached for a dry erase marker, writing directly below the insult, "I'm still here." When the students entered moments later, they saw it. The board, the vandalism, and her message underneath. Tanya stopped in the doorway. "Who the hell did that?" Devin stepped inside slowly. "That wasn't here yesterday." Miguel looked genuinely rattled. "That's permanent marker." Naomi turned to face them all. Her tone was calm, but her words carried weight. "Today's lesson isn't in the book. We're going to talk about fire, and how to keep it from burning through everything." She handed each student a blank sheet of paper. "You're going to write one paragraph. Not about me, about the kind of person who does this." She pointed to the board. "What are they afraid of? What do they want to happen? And what would happen if no one gave them what they wanted?" The class went silent. Rico raised his hand slowly. "Can I just say it out loud?" Naomi nodded. He stood up. "Whoever did that is trying to bring back the old game. They want the rest of us to laugh, to join in, to say, 'See? She's not special. She's just another joke.'" Naomi waited. "And?" Rico exhaled. "And I'm not playing that game anymore." Tanya muttered, "Me neither." Then louder, "We're not all idiots." Devin stood. "Can I fix it?" Naomi blinked. "The board?" "Yeah. My uncle's got this thing, acetone spray. He uses it to clean graffiti off the side of his truck. I'll bring it Monday." She smiled. "Thank you." By third period, word had spread. Room 1B was the room where the teacher got tagged and didn't even flinch. Other students peeked in through the windows. Some lingered in the hallway longer than usual. The principal came by during lunch and gave a quiet nod of acknowledgement but said nothing. That was enough. Later that day, as students packed their bags, Naomi called out, "Before you leave, one last question. Not for credit. Just for you." The class froze, waiting. She asked, "What's louder hate on a wall? Or 100 choices to ignore it?" Rico answered first. "Ignoring doesn't mean pretending. It means not giving it power." Naomi nodded. "Exactly. You don't erase a message like that with a cloth. You erase it by refusing to believe it." Devin added, "By replacing it with something better." Tonya smiled. "Like truth." When the last bell rang, the students filed out slowly. But Rico stayed behind. Again, Naomi glanced at him. "Something on your mind?" He shrugged. "That marker thing. That wasn't me." "I know," she said. "I thought maybe you thought it was." "No," she said again, meeting his eyes. "You've changed." Rico let out a breath. "Yeah, it's weird." Weird is just growth's awkward cousin. He laughed, really laughed, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "You gonna be back Monday?" Naomi smiled. "Unless someone sets my car on fire." He gave her a half smile, the kind that said more than words ever could. Then he was gone. She stood alone in the classroom, staring at the message still etched on the board. She walked over and added one last line beneath her earlier response, "And I'm not alone anymore." As the sun dipped behind the school roof, room 1B stayed quiet, the kind of quiet not built by fear, but by choice. Not a fire, not anymore. A foundation. The weekend passed without noise. Naomi spent it cleaning her tiny apartment, catching up on overdue lesson plans, and walking through Belle Isle Park with no earbuds in just the sound of leaves crackling beneath her boots. She thought often of room 1B, of the vandalized board, of the eyes that had changed when Rico stood up and said, "I'm not playing that game anymore." By Monday morning, she was ready. Not for a confrontation, but for continuation. She arrived early, as always. To her surprise, the graffiti was gone. The board was spotless. She stepped forward and ran a hand across its smooth surface. Faint scent of cleaning chemicals lingered. A small note had been taped to the edge of the frame. "Told you my uncle's spray worked. D." Naomi smiled. Devin had kept his word. She placed the note into the same folder that held the apologies from last week. There was a story forming in these pieces of paper and ink and quiet changes. The students entered slowly, not rowdy, not dragging. Tonya had ditched the gum for a thermos of tea. Devin had headphones around his neck but no phone in hand. Miguel said, "Morning," under his breath. And Rico didn't swagger anymore. He walked like someone who knew he'd earned the space he occupied. Naomi waited until everyone had taken their seat, then picked up a box from beside her desk. "We're doing something different this week," she said. "It's called the Echo Wall." Tonya raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a podcast." It's a space," Naomi explained, "for you to leave behind a truth, a memory, a lesson, anything you think someone else might need one day." She opened the box. Inside were slips of paper, blank. "You don't sign your name, you just write, then drop it in," Devin asked. "Like a time capsule?" "Exactly," Naomi said. "But not for years later. For tomorrow. For whoever needs it." Skepticism lingered. But by second period, slips began to appear. One read, "It's okay to not be okay." Another, "Being silent doesn't mean I agree anymore." Miguel's, folded so tightly it could have been a fortune cookie, said, "I used to laugh when others were hurt. I don't like that version of me anymore." Naomi never asked who wrote what. That wasn't the point. What mattered was that they wrote it all. During lunch, she returned to find someone had taped a message on the front of her desk. "Not every teacher earns it. You did." No name. No marker this time. Just handwriting small, neat, familiar. By the end of the day, the Echo Wall held nearly 30 slips. Naomi read each one in silence after the students left. Some were lighthearted. "If you don't bring snacks, don't complain you're hungry." Some cut deeper. "My dad yells less when I get A's, so I stopped failing on purpose." And then one, folded twice, no lines, ink smudged at the corners. It read, "I used to think strength meant hurting people first. I don't anymore. Strength is staying when you want to disappear." She held that one longer. That evening, Naomi sat at home with a mug of chamomile and her folder of notes. She laid them out on the floor, a silent mosaic. The arc was visible now not just in words, but in weight. The room had shifted. The students had shifted. She had too. Before bed, she wrote a note of her own. Folded it, no name. It would be the first one she added to the Echo Wall tomorrow. "You are not the worst thing you've done. You're the next thing you choose to do." She slept deeply that night for the first time in weeks. Tuesday came with gray skies, but room 1B was bright in its own way. When she walked in, the Echo Wall box had been moved to the center table, with a sign taped above it, "Real things only." No one admitted to making the sign, but Naomi didn't need to ask. She knew the truth. The loudest lessons didn't need a voice. They just needed a place to land. Wednesday arrived with a stillness Naomi couldn't name. The kind that settles in after a long storm, where the air holds its breath, not from fear but from reverence. She sat alone at her desk before first period, reading the newest additions to the Echo Wall. Someone had written, "I used to think school was just something I had to survive. Now I kind of want to stay." Another read, "I didn't realize how heavy hate was until I stopped carrying it." She tucked the notes into the growing envelope inside her desk drawer, her quiet archive of small revolutions. At 8:02 a.m., room 1B began to fill. Devin was the first in, nodding without words. Miguel followed, carrying 2 chairs he'd borrowed from another room without asking. "For the project," he muttered. Tonya brought extra paper, claiming she stole it from the math room because no one's using it right. Rico arrived last, as usual. But this time, he carried a folded poster board. Naomi stood. "What's that?" Rico looked sheepish for half a second. Then he opened it and taped it to the side wall, beside the Echo Wall box. The words, written in thick black marker, read, "This is the class that stayed." Naomi blinked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I figured," Rico said quietly. "People always remember the ones that give up or mess around. Maybe it's time someone remembered the ones who didn't." No one laughed. No one rolled their eyes. The entire class was still. Naomi walked to the front of the room and picked up her marker. She wrote 3 words on the board. "So what now?" Devin raised his hand. "We do something with this. Like, build something that stays." "Like what?" Tonya asked. "A project. A real one. Not essays. Something other people see." Naomi crossed her arms. "What would it be?" Rico leaned back in his chair. "We make a book. Not a real published one, but like a collection. Letters, Notes. Stuff we learned. Stuff we want other people to know. Tanya nodded slowly. The kind of stuff we never saw in books. Naomi smiled. You have 3 days. It's yours to design. They called it the things we never say. For the rest of the week, the classroom buzzed with something alive. Groups formed. Miguel handled layout with surprising focus. Tanya designed the cover, a minimalist sketch of a cracked wall with green vines growing through it. Devin typed up entries. Rico didn't talk much, but he read every page, carefully, like someone guarding something sacred. By Friday, the collection was done. They printed 6 copies sewn for Naomi, 1 for the principal, and 4 to leave in the school library, for whoever needs them, as Rico put it. At the end of the final period that week, Naomi stood before her class, the book in her hands. I've taught a lot of things, she said, but what you built this might be the most important lesson anyone will get from this room. Rico shifted in his seat. You know we still don't like tests, right? Laughter rippled. Naomi grinned. Noted. As the bell rang, the students began to gather their things. Devin approached her desk and handed her a small USB drive. In case anyone ever tries to erase what happened here. Thank you, she said, meaning it more than he could know. Tonya lingered. You gonna stay next year? Naomi nodded. If they let me, they'd be stupid not to. When the room was nearly empty, Rico hung back. He stood near the poster he'd made, tracing the letters with his finger. You know, he said, I used to think teachers were just people waiting to leave. Naomi waited. But you didn't. You stayed when it got ugly. You didn't fold. She walked over, stood beside him. Neither did you. He hesitated, then asked, You ever write in that journal again? The one I read from? Naomi reached into her bag, pulled it out. She opened to a blank page and began to write. Today, my students built something no one told them they could. Not a wall, not a shield, but a door, and they left it open. She looked at him. Want to add something? He took the pen, paused, then wrote. Sometimes the best teachers don't give you answers. They just give you a reason to stay. Naomi closed the journal. When Rico left, he didn't say goodbye. He just nodded once and disappeared into the hallway. That night, as Naomi sat at home grading late assignments, she opened a folder labeled Echo Wall Archives and placed a printed copy of the student book inside. She didn't need applause. She didn't need awards. Because now, in room 1B, there was a new kind of history written not in curriculum, not in tests but in courage, in ink, in quiet acts of resistance and redemption. And as she turned off the lights and looked once more at the phrase they had all chosen to remember, this is the class that stayed, she knew, without a doubt, that something permanent had finally been built.